Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
I am a reaver and I was taught how to pray Salah.
That means every single time I pray,
the person who told me gets the reward.
5 times a day, from Fajr to Isha.
If you want to support someone like me in learning Salah,
then sponsor 10 people for just £100.
remember the Prophet, peace be upon him, said,
Charity does not decrease wealth. Click the button and donate now.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel. I just came across a gem of a debate between Dan Bilzerian and a compulsive liar Zionist Twitter troll, which was hosted by Jake Shields. Both Dan and Jake are pro-Palestine and have been massively important voices in fighting back against false Israeli propaganda. Not only did Dan spectacularly dismantle every weak argument the slippery Zionist came up with, but Jake also magnificently took the entire original debate, fact-checked it, added screenshots as proof, along with a truth and lies scoreboard before re-uploading it, and in the end exposing the Zionist as a complete and utter fraud that he is. Let's watch the first clip where they discuss Palestine and Iraq.
The IDF taps chief rabbi who once seemed to permit wartime rape.
Who? Never heard. Why do you hear this, but I don't ever hear this?
Well, there was the guy that said they kill babies as a hobby.
Up, like, obscure shit.
I don't want to make like 2 on one.
Front page, Times of Israel.
Karam also women's enlisted. You said you would rather eat cow dung than kiss the Western Wall.
Yes.
You would really eat cow dung?
Then pledge allegiance to that.
Not to pledge allegiance to the state. The wall has nothing to do with the state.
That I would not.
The wall is God's.
That wall to me represents genocide. It represents
apartheid.
It represents supremacy. It represents all sorts of things.
If it represents apartheid, why are the Jews the ones not allowed on the Temple Mount?
I don't know what your religious practice.
The Jews are the ones who are apartheided.
No, they're not. This total bullshit.
This is the first time in history that Jews are allowed to go to selected Arab countries, Dubai.
That has nothing to do with what's going on in Israel.
Yeah, I think the Temple Mount, isn't that where the Jewish terrorist came in and he killed it?
No, that's Barak Goldstein, and he did that to prevent a massacre, actually. And I know the family.
He killed terrorism to prevent a massacre.
They were plotting. They
plot killing women and children. And
no, they were in a mosque, stockpiling weapons. They were about to. No. Yeah, I know the family. I know his daughter.
That was a complete terror attack. He came in.
You're talking about Baruch Goldstein from like 50 years ago?
The guy that came in and just shot up the
in
mosque.
Hebron.
So, I believe that's it when I look it up. That was
they were like about ready to. They were about ready to massacre the people of Hebron. I'm not making it up.
They were not.
Why are you guys so obsessed with just Israel?
Because we're funding a genocide.
What about other
right
countries?
Now?
What about other countries that we're funding?
What other countries committing a genocide?
First of all, using
trillions of dollars to
trillions
trillions.
Come on, Jake. I mean, Dan. Trillions.
Did we not fight the fucking Iraq war for you guys? Did Netanyahu not come to Congress and testify that there's weapons of mass destruction? Have you guys not led us into every?
Do you actually know
conflict?
who gave the intelligence to the Americans that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction?
I know Netanyahu testified in front of Congress.
It was Germany.
And they said that it would be way better
It was
off.
Germany. And do you know who actually built Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction program?
Have any.
He did, actually.
He didn't have
He was
weapons
caught
of
with
mass destruction.
massive amounts of weapons of mass destruction. He didn't have nuclear missiles.
Okay.
He had a plutonium reactor that was destroyed by Israel.
I know there was no weapons of mass destruction. You're like sidetracking now.
I'm not
Netanyahu
sidetracking.
Absolutely.
Hold on, let me answer your question.
In front of Congress,
I was in the middle of answering your question.
And there was not
weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They came from Germany.
There was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Yes, there were.
No, there was not.
No, everyone knows
there was.
Okay, no, Iraq did not possess weapons of mass destruction. WMDs at the time the U.S. led the invasion in fucking 2003. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
Why are you guys allowed to rape non-Jews?
We're not allowed to rape non-Jews.
Really? Then why didn't that guy go to jail when they had him on?
I don't know what
video?
you're talking about.
The guy that raped him in prison.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And there was rabbis that condoned it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
He was literally on video raping a Palestinian prisoner. It's not like
it was a gang.
This isn't like conspiracy theory. It's on public television, and now the guy's.
And did he go to jail?
They brought him on TV. They brought him on TV to do reality shows.
I feel like you kind of ruined the podcast, Dan.
As I said before, Jake adding the screenshots and the scoreboard was a brilliant touch. The Zionists' denial of the IDF raping Palestinian citizens and prisoners was nothing short of disgusting. Anyone that defends such acts is just rotten to the core. As Dan said, that is exactly what Israel did. And not only did they defend it, they celebrated it by making the perpetrators celebrity TV personalities in Israel. This is your ethno-state, built off the killing of children and forced sexual violence and exploitation. I must admit that it was hilarious to see this Israeli apologist cry about how Dan totally exposing him ruined his podcast experience. And respect to Dan for refusing to go through the humiliation ritual of touching the Western Wall in Jerusalem, which now represents genocide to so many people due to how every Western politician is made to pledge their allegiance to Israel there, whilst funding the death of Palestinians, as Dan said. The Zionists not only denied that Israel is an apartheid state that favours Jewish people above everyone else, he even had the audacity to make false claims that Israelis are the ones facing apartheid and not being able to travel to Arab nations freely, when the complete opposite is true. Well done to Jake for countering by bringing up yet another Zionist extremist who committed a massacre at a Palestinian mosque, which his pro-Israel guest spun as a heroic act by claiming it was due to secret weapons being stored in the place of worship, which again was an obvious lie. How many times have we heard this before? Whenever Israelis are guilty of the mass murder of Muslims, they make up a story that the Muslims had secret weapons of mass destruction. I'm surprised he didn't say Hamas was under the mosque. And speaking of false accusations of weapons of mass destruction, when Dan correctly pointed out that Netanyahu dragged the US into invading Iraq under this false premise, Dan's Zionist opponent doubled down by claiming this lie was true, despite George Bush, the US president at the time, and even the current president Donald Trump admitting it wasn't true. And not only that, the Zionist lied once again by blaming Germany instead of Israel for the fake WMD intel Netanyahu himself provided on video while speaking before the US Congress in 2002 that led to the US invading Iraq. How can anyone take this man seriously after that? The Zio posed the question, why are Dan and Jake so obsessed with Israel? Which is basically him saying, stop noticing the war crimes we're committing. As Dan said, it's because Western governments are funding the Gaza genocide at our expense and without our consent, and the majority of people have had enough. Let's watch the next clip where the topic of Iran, Yemen and Syria comes up.
Why does Israel have nukes in the first place?
They stole it from America.
Bro, I don't care, and I love the fact that we do.
Okay, but you guys are like going nuts about Iran having them, and you guys illegally acquired them.
You should too, because we have them, or supposedly have them.
You guys acquired
and
them.
And if Iran has them,
do
you know that Iran's target isn't even really Israel?
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
They don't give a shit about America.
Yeah. It's Saudi Arabia, Dan.
Why would they want to kill Saudi Arabia over
Because
Israel?
You don't understand Islam. In Islam, the Sunni and the Shia have been at war with each other since the beginning of Islam. If Iran destroyed Israel overnight and wiped it out, they're not done. They're not complete. Their game isn't over. Their story isn't finished. Their story finishes when their 12th imam comes and takes the Mecca and walks all the way to Saudi Arabia and conquers Saudi Arabia. Why do you think Saudi Arabia is entering into the Abraham Accords? And why did Qatar leave Iran?
That's why ISIS.
Why did Qatar leave Iran, give 1.2 trillion to Trump, and meet with Ronald Lauder, the chairman of the World Zionist Congress, on television? The Emir of Qatar met with Ron Lauder. Sold out? There is no greater conflict in the world of hatred than the Shia versus the Sunni. They will kill each other till the end of time. Everywhere on TV, you could see it. They even fight each other in the streets of England.
Last time Iran and Saudi went to battle?
Iraq, because they battled Iraq. They bordered each other. Saddam Hussein.
Proxy wars.
So 20,
yeah, and then
ago?
I was actually very involved in this. The Battle of Kirkuk. When the Iranians took Kirkuk from Iraq after we pulled out of Iraq.
Okay, but what's that got to do with America?
These are very important strategic things. Look at Yemen, Dan.
The only reason they were blockading us, though, was because of our support for Israel.
Do you want... remember when the Muslim Brotherhood took over Egypt? Would you want the Muslim Brotherhood to control all imports into Europe?
I would much rather them than Israel.
Egypt has all sorts of leverage that they use on Europe all the time. Like non-hostile things. Because they don't want open hostility. So maybe a tanker will get stuck in the canal.
The Houthis are pissed at Israel.
The Houthis are employed by Iran.
Okay, and they're pissed at Israel. What's the point?
The point is that Iran wants to control all trade into Europe. Iran is the #1 financier of the Islamification of Europe.
Iran's
You're
not
gonna
trying to
tell
stop
me
our
Do you
trade.
think that
I
the
should be
Muslims-
more worried about Iran than Israel?
For sure. Do you think that the Islamification in Europe is a bad thing?
Well, I think the open borders that's perpetuated by this Jewish nonsense that they want to.
Right. Everything's to blame by the Jews.
Let's
Whites
see,
have no
let's see,
faculty.
is it
Whites
happening-
can never
is it
fuck
happening
up.
in fucking Japan? Is it happening in fucking China? No, it's happening in the places that
They
Jews are
forbade
in control.
Muslims. Actually, I just read this story recently that they've like interned the Muslims in China and turned the mosques into places where they serve alcohol and throw parties for people, for Chinese citizens. You know, like they've treated Muslims very differently than the West. How did the Jews flood Europe with all the illegals or all the Muslim migrants that are destroying Europe?
Do you know how many fucking Jews said, like, we need to, you know, make this a melting pot. We need to destroy the white race. Always a fucking Jew saying this.
It all started with Syria, by the way. There wasn't a mass migration crisis until Syria happened.
Israel wanted to overthrow Syria, though. That war was pushed by America.
Now
and
we're
Israel.
in the greatest
Netanyahu
period.
talked about all the different countries that he wanted to topple.
Syria,
If we get rid of Saddam, it's going to be great. If we get rid of Gaddafi, it's going to be great. All
And
these
none of it's
countries
been great,
are absolute shitholes now. This whole Netanyahu, we have to topple this regime. We have to topple this regime. We'll add stability to the region. It's all
just endless wars.
When Dan brought up the topic of Israel secretly and illegally having nuclear weapons of mass destruction, he was met with both denial and defiance from his scatterbrained opponent, who justified Israel's illegal actions by blaming Iran, despite Iran not having any nuclear weapons. As Jake said, it's common knowledge that Israel stole from America in order to develop their illegal nukes. What was astonishing to me was that this guy claimed that Israel is protecting Sunni Muslims in Saudi and Qatar from Iran, while Israel is actually killing Sunni Muslims in Palestine as we speak. Yes, Saudi Arabia and Iran are not on the best terms, but Israel is the #1 threat to the Middle East, hands down, not Iran. The Zionists even claim to understand Islam by stupidly equating the Sunni-Shia conflict as somehow defining the whole religion. And as for his claim that this is the worst conflict in Islamic history, I beg to differ. Although it is quite bad to say the least, the worst conflict Muslims have faced is against Israeli Zionist supremacists. It's the one thing that unites all Muslims, Sunnis and Shias included, as we saw when Iran recently whooped Israel for sneak attacking them. As Dan correctly stated, the Gulf leaders that are in business with Israel and America are complete sellouts. Hence why they don't lift a finger to help the Palestinian Sunnis being killed by the Israelis. As Jake pointed out to his guest after he slandered Yemen, the only reason Yemen are intercepting US ships is because America are sending supplies to Israel to aid them in the Gaza genocide, which Yemen strongly oppose. Dan claimed that he would prefer that Muslims in the Middle East be in charge of trade and import to Europe rather than Israel due to Israel's dishonest track record. I'm sure most people, myself included, would agree with that position. And when all else failed, the Zio clown falsely accused Iran, a Shia majority country, of championing Muslim immigration to Europe, specifically Syrians, the majority of whom are Sunni, despite him just saying that they hate each other. Iran is not behind Muslims from war-torn nations seeking refuge in the West. Israel are. As Jake and Dan said, all wars and invasions Israel have had America do on their behalf has created the refugee crisis in Syria, as well as in numerous other destabilised Muslim nations. This fool even threw some anti-China nonsense into the mix during his confused rambling. Let's watch the last clip where Dan and Jake obliterate the Zionist mouthpiece by exposing the various false flag attacks Israel is responsible for, some of which they even pinned on Muslims.
Do you think 9/11 was a controlled demolition? Or do you think that
it was definitely a controlled demolition.
Yeah, okay, so who do you think did that?
The Bushes and the CIA.
Who do you think benefits
were
from
involved,
that?
but
Major
you
deep
don't,
state.
You don't think that Israel benefits from that? What about all these Israeli
I don't think
art
that
students that were in there?
I don't believe that these 5 dancing Israelis is a bar high enough as
No, I'm not
evidence.
talking about that.
They
I'm
were
talking about all the
way
fucking
beyond
art students
that,
that
though.
were in there planning fucking explosives. The fucking when they lit up the side of the thing said E-team on it.
I know
that
the
was
guy.
exactly
What's
where
his
the
name? The
fucking
guy
blanket-
who owned the building. That was really
Lucky
sketch.
Larry.
Oh,
He,
you think?
he was good friends
That
with
was
Benjamin
very
Netanyahu.
sketchy.
He made 4.5
I know.
billion off that.
This-
So
What
you
about all
don't
the
draw
betting
any
against?
correlation to fucking Israel there?
Not to Israel.
There was also major
To Larry,
betting against
yeah.
the stock market that
Okay, so
day.
Larry-
But it seems like
okay,
the
but they're
government, because
working
Netanyahu
together.
was friends with that guy. There was the dancing Israelis. There was Urban Movers, which that's who they worked for. That guy fled to the country
There was-
right after.
Israel has no allies in the world except the United States. Why would Israel attack the United States?
Why
What do
did
they get from
USS
it?
Liberty?
What do they
about
get?
Levant affair?
We'll
They
get to that.
benefit every
One
time they
subject
do a
at a
false
time.
flag attack. Let's go through it.
Why do
Levant
you-
affair. That was their first false flag
False
attack.
flag.
They truly got caught when they
Dude,
attacked
you
U.S.
know,
citizens,
9/11
when they attacked their allies to try and get benefit.
Right.
They're killing their allies to try and blame the
I don't know
Muslim
much about the
Brotherhood.
Levant affair.
They bombed America and British, and they tried blaming it on the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah,
so
they
they were
wanted
trying.
to
It was a
drag
false
us
flag
in.
attack. It was in 54, 56 or something. They
Before.
tried killing President Truman before that. the Stern game tried assassinating him with letter bombs.
Let's use USS Liberty as like the anchor of this subject. Israel immediately came clean, first of all. Before the U.S. said, hey, there was an attack, Israel said, hey, we accidentally did this attack.
So you're saying that they took ownership of it, and I'm saying they didn't. I think that's a big deal. Them saying that it was an accident is just total fucking bullshit.
USS Liberty shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Why not?
Because it was the middle of a battlefield. First of all, the largest friendly fire incident took place between England and America. 35 people were killed, 34 on USS Liberty. Nobody cares about England doing a false flag, or not a false flag.
What was England's false flag?
There were many of them, actually. There were several. The latest one was in Desert Storm, 1991.
We're not talking about that. It's way worse to kill your fucking ally on purpose. Infinitely fucking worse. It's not even close. Because I was in the Navy. You weren't. Okay, so I did 4 years in the Navy. I've been on a fucking ship. I know how it works. Like, I've been in the fucking airplane. People don't just accidentally fucking light up a fucking boat. People don't just accidentally drop napalm. It's not like shooting fucking ducks in the sky. When you're in the fucking military, you follow very specific orders. You don't just fire on random
The
ships.
American military is very well organized compared to 1967
Israel. This idea that like civilians are flying fighter jets is total fucking horseshit.
They weren't even fighter jets. They were jets with the
They were not
fans.
propellers. They were fucking jet fighters.
They were jets, but they also had propellers.
David on there. Let's just not spew bullshit.
I'm saying that the Israeli Air Force.
This was not a propeller jet. So stop trying to like paint a bullshit picture.
It wasn't a propeller jet.
jet.
It was a horrible thing that should never have happened.
No. This was an actual jet. They shot the shit for an hour and a half. They dropped napalm on the deck. They shot the fucking lifeboats, which is a fucking war crime. They brought in another ship to torpedo the vessel. They brought in attack helicopters. They knew it was a U.S. warship because you fly fucking flags. I was in the military. You have a big fucking flag flying. You've got USS whatever on the fucking hull of the boat. Like, it's on the stern. It's very, very obviously identified U.S. warship. They flew over multiple times to check. They got the order and they attacked. And the only person that got thrown in jail was the person that didn't want to fucking attack. Probably because they realized that it was a fucking U.S. ship. And then afterwards, they took life rafts and they put them on fucking display as trophies. Okay? So don't tell me this was like some accident that's just horseshit. You haven't been able to refute one single.
By the way, this is me not giving a fuck.
I mean, yeah,
it's water.
This is you washing away your fucking sorrows after losing the debate.
It's no surprise that the Zionists would deny Israel's involvement in 9/11, despite all the evidence that both Dan and Jake listed off suggesting otherwise. This man even played dumb by asking why would Israel attack their own allies, despite once again Jake and Dan giving numerous examples of false flag events that Israel themselves have admitted to once they were caught red-handed. As Jake said, Israel has been attacking Britain and America since the 1950s, whilst pinning the blame on Muslims, with the sole purpose of starting wars in the Middle East in order to expand their land. And despite this Zionist propagandist's poor attempts at trying to spin Israel's very deliberate and deadly false flag attacks on their own supposed allies as accidental, Dan Bilzerian was not having it, and wrecked this clown with back-to-back historical facts and inside information from his own personal experience in the Navy. As you saw, this guy tried everything. He even made up completely fabricated false flag attacks that the UK didn't even commit out of thin air to justify Israel stabbing their allies in the back, similar to how all these Zio propagandists do when they cite World War II as an excuse to commit genocide in Gaza. It was hilarious to see him trip over his own lies and admit Israel did in fact commit false flag events before he corrected himself. I think it's safe to say that the Zionist not only lost the debate, he was a nervous wreck afterwards. From the tally, it's clear to see that Dan Bilzerian did not speak a single falsehood, whereas his opponent told 50 barefaced deceitful lies. Well done to Jake and Dan for exposing this troll, as well as the historical evil committed by Israel. I recommend you go and watch the full debate, as there were a lot of really explicit talking points that I had to leave out. I've left a link for it in the description section. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join my free Telegram group, which is also linked in the description. And remember to like, subscribe and become a channel member for access to exclusive content. Until next time, inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.